In one show, a man melts a stranger's head off in front of a cheering crowd. In another, a boy is gunned down in the desert by drug dealers, and even the dealers are sickened, one of them throwing a punch at the killer. Both Breaking Bad and The Boys are stuffed with blood, lies, and murder, and both get called two of the darkest worlds ever put on television. But being dark is not the same as being corrupt, and the real question is which of these two worlds has rotted all the way through. Breaking Bad shows a good world poisoned by one bad man. The Boys shows good people trapped in a world that was already broken before they were born. By the end of this video, the answer to which one is more morally corrupt will be impossible to argue with. And it comes down to three simple things: who has to hide, who gets hunted, and who gets cheered. Welcome to Between the Episodes. Let's begin. Section 1. One Bad Man and One Broken World. Near the end of the second season of Breaking Bad, in an episode named Phoenix, a man stands in a dark bedroom and watches a young woman die. Her name is Jane. She is lying on her back and she has started to choke in her sleep. The thing that would save her is small. All it would take is rolling her onto her side, the exact same move the man had done earlier that very day for his own baby daughter so she would not choke. He knows this. He is a high school chemistry teacher, smart enough to understand precisely what is happening in front of him. He steps forward to help her. Then he stops. He pulls his hand back and lets her die, and he cries a little while it happens. And afterward, his face turns flat and calm and unreadable. The man is Walter White, and at this point in the story, he still tells everyone, including himself, that he is a decent person who only does bad things because he has to. That single moment holds the whole argument of this video inside it. Jane had been blackmailing Walt. With her gone, that problem disappears. So Walt makes a choice. Nobody forces his hand. There is no gun pointed at him, and no clock ticking down. A girl is dying an arm's length away, and a man who could save her decides her death is more useful to him than her life. He does it quietly, in private, where no one will ever know. Here is the part that matters most about that scene, and it has almost nothing to do with Jane. The world around Walter White is completely normal. Albuquerque, New Mexico, where the show takes place, is an ordinary American city. The police work, the hospitals work, the schools work. Walt has a wife, a teenage son, and a baby on the way. His own brother-in-law is an agent for the Drug Enforcement Administration, the very people whose job is to catch men exactly like the man Walt is becoming. The streets are safe. The neighbors are friendly. There is nothing wrong with the place Walt lives in at all. The only thing going wrong in that world is Walter White himself. That is the first kind of moral corruption, and it is the kind Breaking Bad spends 5 seasons studying. One man, surrounded by a basically good and working world, slowly turns rotten from the inside. Every terrible thing he does, he chooses. He could stop at any point. The world keeps offering him exits, and he keeps walking past them. The horror of Breaking Bad is the horror of watching someone ordinary, someone who started out a lot like a regular person, decide again and again to become something monstrous. Now compare the opening of a very different show. The Boys begins in 2019, and its first episode is called The Name of the Game. A young man named Huey is standing on a city sidewalk, holding hands with his girlfriend, Robin. They are talking about their future. It is a sweet, plain little scene, the kind of small, happy moment that real life is made of. Then, with no warning at all, a superhero called A-Train comes sprinting down the street at a speed far too fast for any eye to follow. He runs straight through Robin. Her body bursts apart on impact. 1 second she is there, mid-sentence, alive and laughing. The next second she is gone, and Huey is left standing on the sidewalk, holding nothing but her 2 severed hands, covered in her blood, while strangers walk past. A-Train was moving that fast, partly because he had been using a drug that boosts a hero's powers, so he could stay the fastest man alive and keep his fame and his sponsors. He did not even slow down. He barely noticed. And here is where this world shows its true face, much faster than Breaking Bad ever does. A superhero just killed an innocent woman in the street through pure carelessness. So what happens next? Nothing happens to A-Train. Nothing at all. The giant company that owns him, a corporation called Vought, swings into action, and not to help. They hold a press conference and lie about it. They say A-Train was rushing to stop a bank robbery, that he was a hero doing hero work, and that Robin was the one who stepped into his path. None of that is true. Then, Vought sends lawyers to Huey with a check for $45,000 and a piece of paper to sign. The money is not an apology. The money is a lid meant to keep him quiet, to make the dead girl disappear from the story so the brand stays shiny. The killer goes back to being famous. The company goes back to making money. The woman is treated like a spill that needs wiping up. That is the second kind of moral corruption, and it is a completely different animal from the first. In The Boys, the badness is not coming from one person who went wrong. The badness is built into the whole place. The most powerful people in this world can kill without getting in trouble. The biggest company lies as easily as breathing and gets away with it. The law cannot touch a superhero because the public loves them and the corporation protects them. Robin dies in the very first minutes of the very first episode, before the main story has even started, before any single character has had to make a hard choice. Her death is just an ordinary Tuesday in this world. That is simply how things already work there. So this brings the whole video to the question on the table. The title asks, which world was more morally corrupt, Breaking Bad or The Boys? To answer that fairly, the words have to be pinned down first, because the word corrupt gets thrown around a lot and ends up meaning almost nothing. A person is morally corrupt when they choose to do wrong, even though the world around them still mostly works. The rules exist. Right and wrong are still understood by the people nearby. Getting caught is still possible. The corrupt person knows all of this and does the wrong thing anyway, for their own gain. That is Walter White, exactly. His world never stops being a place where his actions are clearly evil and clearly punishable. He just decides he does not care. A world is morally corrupt when the rot has spread past any one person and soaked into everything. The powerful are protected instead of punished. The institutions, meaning the big organizations like companies, governments, and police that are supposed to keep order, are bent toward covering up harm instead of stopping it. And worst of all, the ordinary people start going along with it. In a corrupt world, a good person doing the right thing is the strange one, the odd one out, the one who gets crushed. That is the world of The Boys, top to bottom. Once those two meanings are set side by side, something becomes very clear, and it is worth saying plainly. Breaking Bad is mostly the story of a bad man living in a good world. The Boys is mostly the story of good people trapped in a bad world. They are not telling the same kind of story at all, even though both are full of blood and lying and death. This is exactly why the comparison is so interesting, and why it is not as simple as just counting up the dead bodies. If a person only counted murders, the answer might look easy, because both shows pile up corpses by the truckload. But murders alone do not measure how corrupt a world is. What measures it is how the world responds to those murders. When Walter White kills, his world treats it as a crime. There are detectives on the case. There is a manhunt. His own family is destroyed when the truth comes out. The world of Breaking Bad never once decides that what Walt did was okay. It hunts him for it. The rot stays trapped inside one man and the small circle of people he drags down with him. When a superhero kills in The Boys, the world often shrugs or covers it up, or in the most disturbing cases, claps. The killing does not break the rules of that world. The killing is allowed by the rules of that world. That difference is the entire heart of this video. And the two shows are not just describing two made-up places for fun. Each one is holding up a kind of warning, and the warnings are different. Breaking Bad is a warning about the inside of a single human being. It says that the line between a normal person and a monster is much thinner than anyone wants to believe, and that a regular man with a regular life can step over that line on his own, one small choice at a time, with no devil whispering in his ear. The danger in Breaking Bad lives inside the human heart. The Boys is a warning about something bigger and colder. It says that a whole society can be shaped to feed its monsters and protect them, and even cheer them on. It says that when enough power lands in too few hands, and when a company can sell those hands to the public as heroes, the normal rules of right and wrong stop working for everybody, not just for one man. The danger in The Boys does not live inside one heart. It lives in the system itself, in the way the whole world is wired. That gap between the two warnings is going to shape everything that comes next in this video. Walter White's worst moments will keep showing the same thing over and over, that the world around him stayed sane while he lost his mind. The worst moments in The Boys will keep showing the opposite, that the people lost their minds while a handful of monsters stayed perfectly calm and in control. Both are dark. Both are about how easily good things go bad. But they are pointing their cameras at two completely different sources of the bad. There is one more thing worth setting down before going any deeper, and it is about fairness. It would be lazy to simply declare that one show wins because its world looks scarier on the surface. A careful answer has to weigh real evidence from both shows, scene by scene, and judge each world by its own rules and its own choices. Some of the upcoming examples from Breaking Bad are going to be genuinely worse, on a person-to-person level, than anything in The Boys. A man poisons a child to manipulate his partner. A teenager is shot dead in a desert for the crime of riding his bike past the wrong spot. Those are real and awful. The question is never going to be whether Breaking Bad contains evil acts, because it overflows with them. The question is whether those evil acts come from a sick world or from sick people inside a healthy one. The same fairness has to be given to The Boys. It would be easy to point at its loudest, bloodiest moments and call the whole world rotten, but a careful look has to ask how deep the rot really goes. Whether the good characters have any real power to push back, and whether the ordinary public is innocent and fooled, or whether they are part of the problem too. Those are not easy questions, and the show gives complicated answers across its seasons. So that is the ground this video is standing on. Two shows, two kinds of corruption, and one honest question between them. Breaking Bad shows a clean place poisoned by one man's choices. The Boys shows a poisoned place where a clean person can barely survive. The rest of this video is about testing both of those claims hard, with real scenes, real episodes, and the actual rules each world plays by, until the answer to the title earns the right to be called true. Before we move on, If you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. To do that properly, the place to start is with the single most ordinary person in either story. Before the boys and its world of gods and corporations enters the picture, there is just a man in a brown jacket, dying of cancer, standing in a chemistry classroom in front of bored teenagers. The first job is to understand exactly how that man, of all people, became one of the most frightening figures on television, and what his slow fall reveals about the world that was watching him the whole time. Section 2. The Man Who Chose Every Step. Walter White spent the first 50 years of his life being almost nobody. He taught chemistry to bored teenagers who barely looked up at him. To make a little extra money, he took a second job at a car wash, where some of those same students sometimes spotted him wiping down their parents' tires. He lived in a small house in Albuquerque with a wife, a son, and a stack of ordinary money worries that never seemed to shrink. Then a doctor told him he had lung cancer and maybe a couple of years left to live. Something inside the quiet man cracked open that day, and the rest of the show is the story of what came crawling out. The reason Walt gives at the start is simple and almost sympathetic. He is dying. He will leave behind a pregnant wife and a teenage son with special needs. He has no real savings. So when he decides to use his chemistry skills to cook the drug methamphetamine, he wraps the choice in a blanket that almost anyone would understand. He is doing it for his family. He wants to leave them money before the cancer takes him. That is the story Walt tells the world, and for a long time, it is the story he tells himself. Right at the beginning, though, the show plants a fact that quietly ruins that excuse. And it is a fact too many people forget. Walt did not have to do any of this. He had a way out, handed to him for free. Years before the show begins, Walt helped start a science company with two friends, and then walked away from it. Those two friends, Gretchen and Elliot, went on to become extremely rich. When they learn Walt is sick, they offer to pay for every penny of his cancer treatment. They even offer him a real job with good health insurance. The door out of his money problem is wide open, with no crime required and no danger at all. Walt slams that door shut. He cannot stand the idea of taking their help, because it would feel like charity, like pity, like an admission that his old friends won and he lost. His pride will not allow it. So he turns down the clean, legal, safe rescue, and he goes back to cooking poison in the desert. That choice, made in private and for no reason except wounded pride, is the first clear proof of where the rot in Breaking Bad actually lives. The world offered Walt a good ending. He said no to it. At the start, Walt is still soft. The third episode of the whole series shows him with a captured drug dealer named Crazy 8, chained up in a basement, and Walt has to decide whether to kill him. The man cannot bring himself to do it. He makes a written list, with reasons to let the prisoner go on one side and reasons to kill him on the other. The list of reasons to spare him is long and human. He brings the man food. He talks with him. He looks for any path that does not end in blood. Only when he discovers the prisoner has hidden a broken piece of plate to stab him with does Walt finally do the deed, and it leaves him shaking and sick afterward. That is who Walter White is at the beginning, a man who agonizes over one death and nearly cannot go through with it. Hold that image, because of where it ends up. By the second season, the agonizing is already fading. The scene with Jane, the one covered earlier, is the hinge the whole show swings on. Walt watches a young woman choke to death and chooses not to save her, all to keep his hold over his partner Jesse and to make a blackmail problem disappear. There is no list this time. There is no shaking sickness that lasts for days. There is a moment of tears, and then there is a flat, calm face. And then there is the rest of his life. The man who could barely kill one dangerous prisoner has learned to let an innocent person die in silence and walk away. The fall keeps going, and each step down is a choice Walt makes with his eyes open. In the fourth season comes the act that many viewers point to as his single worst. Walt is in a desperate spot, trapped under the thumb of a powerful drug boss named Gus Fring, and he needs his partner Jesse back on his side to help bring Gus down. Jesse has grown close to a woman named Andrea and her young son, Brock. So Walt poisons the child. He uses berries from a plant called Lily of the Valley to make the little boy dangerously sick, then arranges things so that Jesse will blame Gus for it. The plan works. Jesse, terrified and furious at the wrong man, comes back to Walt's side. A child nearly dies so that one grown man can win a game against another grown man. That moment deserves a hard look, because it strips away the family excuse completely. Poisoning Brock did nothing to provide for Walt's wife and children. It did not pay a medical bill. It was a cold tool used to control another person, with a child's life as the price. The show even confirms it later, when Walt himself admits to Jesse that he did it. A man who once could not kill one drug dealer without a written list of reasons now poisons a kid as part of a clever plan and barely loses sleep over it. The biggest single body count Walt ever orders comes near the end. By the fifth season, he has become a true kingpin, and there are men sitting in prison who could tell the police everything about him. So Walt arranges to have them all killed at once. He hires a violent prison gang, and when the gang leader says it cannot be done the way Walt wants, Walt simply tells him to figure it out. 10 men are murdered inside 2 minutes, spread across 3 different prisons. Some are stabbed in their cells. One is set on fire and burned alive. Walt watches the time tick by on his watch, calm as a man waiting for a kettle to boil. The teacher who agonized over one death now orders 10 with a single sentence and checks his watch while it happens. Every one of those steps was a door Walt walked through on his own. And here is the piece that makes Breaking Bad such a clean study of one person going bad. Around every single one of those choices, the world stayed completely sane. The police never stopped being the police. Killing never stopped being a crime. Hank, Walt's own brother-in-law, was a drug agent the entire time, slowly closing in, treating every clue as the evidence of evil that it was. There were no laws bent to protect Walt. There was no company spinning his murders into good news. The town of Albuquerque did not throw him a parade. Walt had to lie and hide and run precisely because his world never once decided his crimes were acceptable. The rot was sealed up inside him, and the small circle of people he poisoned along the way. The proof of all this comes from Walt's own mouth, right at the very end. And it is the most important confession in the whole series. For 5 seasons, he insists that everything he did for his family. In the final episode, with the running and the lying nearly over, his wife Skylar is sitting across from him, and Walt finally tells her the truth. The family story had always been a cover. He admits that he did it for himself. He says he did it because it made him feel alive. Because he was good at it. Because for once in his small gray life, he felt powerful and real. The whole tower of excuses comes down in a few quiet sentences. There was no devil. There was no broken world forcing his hand. There was a proud, smart, ordinary man who discovered he enjoyed being a monster. and who kept choosing it because of how it made him feel. That admission is why Breaking Bad sits so firmly on one side of this video's question. The show is a portrait of a single human being, and it argues that the most dangerous thing in its world is the human heart left alone with its own pride and hunger. Walt did not need a corrupt society to make him fall. He fell in a normal one. The danger came from inside, and the world spent 5 seasons doing exactly what a decent world is supposed to do, which is hunt the monster down. This says something a little frightening about real life, too, and that is part of why the show became so famous. It suggests that the line between a regular neighbor and a killer is much thinner than people like to believe. Walt was not born evil. He was not raised in some pit of cruelty. He was a chemistry teacher who carpooled and helped with homework and had friends and a backyard. The show makes the case that an ordinary person, given enough pride and a little power and a string of small bad choices, can become something terrible all on their own, without any help from a broken world at all. The horror is how recognizable Walt is. He starts out close to everyone. So that is one full answer to half of the question. In Breaking Bad, the corruption is shaped exactly like a man. It begins in one heart, spreads to the few people that heart can reach, and gets chased to its grave by a world that never lost its sense of right and wrong. The place Walt lived in stayed good while he went bad. That is the whole engine of the show, and it is the opposite of the engine driving the other series in this video. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Because there is a very different kind of place out there. A place where killers are not chased, but protected. A place where a giant company gets to decide what counts as a hero and what counts as a crime. And where the law cannot lay a finger on the most powerful people alive. A place where the public does not hunt the monsters at all, but lines up to cheer for them. To understand that world, the story has to leave the quiet streets of Albuquerque behind and step into a city where men fly, where a corporation sells gods to the public like soda, and where the first innocent victim hits the ground in the opening minutes, while everyone important looks the other way. Section 3. A world already rotten. The world of the boys looks, at first glance, like a dream. Superheroes are real, and the public adores them. Their faces are on billboards the size of buildings. Children wear their costumes and beg for their action figures. They star in big-budget movies about themselves, give interviews on morning talk shows, and walk red carpets while crowds scream their names. The most famous of them are treated like living gods, beautiful and powerful and good, smiling down on the people who love them. That is the shine on the surface of this world. It takes only a few minutes for the show to scrape that shine away and reveal the dirt underneath. The very first thing this world does once the story begins is cover up a murder. A speedster hero named A-Train kills an innocent young woman named Robin in the street, running clean through her while moving far too fast. He was partly able to move that fast because he had been taking a drug that boosts a hero's powers. A drug he used so he could stay famous as the fastest man alive. He does not stop. He barely even notices. And the moment it happens, the machine that runs this world springs into action. Not to do justice, but to protect the killer and bury the truth. That machine has a name, and understanding it is the key to understanding everything about this world. The name is Vought. Vought is a giant company, and it owns the superheroes the way a studio owns movie stars. It manages them, advertises them, controls what they say in public, and most of all, It makes enormous piles of money off of them. The heroes are products. Vought sells their image, their toys, their films, and their good name. And the company will do almost anything to keep those products looking clean and lovable. Because a clean, lovable hero sells, and a killer does not. So after A-Train turns Robin into a smear on the pavement, Vought holds a press conference and lies. The company tells the public that A-Train was racing to stop a bank robbery, that he was a hero in the middle of saving the day, and that poor Robin had carelessly stepped into his path. Every piece of that is false. Then Vought sends its lawyers to Robin's grieving boyfriend, Huey, with a check for $45,000 and a paper to sign. The money is not sorrow, and it is not an apology. The money is a gag, meant to keep his mouth shut and make the dead girl quietly vanish from the story so the brand stays bright. The killer keeps his fame. The company keeps its profit. The dead woman becomes a problem that was managed. Compare that to how Walter White's world treated his crimes. When Walt killed, the police hunted him. The act stayed a crime. His own family came apart when the truth surfaced. In the world of the boys, the killing does not even slow A-Train down, because the company in charge has decided that the truth is bad for business. That single difference, shown in the opening minutes, announces what kind of place this is. The rot is not hiding inside one bad person here. The rot is the system. The machine that is supposed to keep order is instead built to protect the powerful and crush anyone in their way. The next proof comes from the same first episode, and it lands on a character who matters enormously to this whole comparison. Her name is Annie January, though the public knows her by her hero name, Starlight. Annie is young, kind, and genuinely good. She grew up dreaming of being a real hero, the honest kind. The kind who saves people because it is right. She earns a spot on the top hero team, called the Seven, and she arrives on her first day glowing with hope. That hope lasts about an hour. On that first day, one of her famous new teammates, an underwater hero called the Deep, gets her alone and uses his power over her career to force her into a sexual act. He makes it clear that he is important and she is nobody yet, and that he can have her thrown off the team with a word. Frightened and trapped, she gives in. A young woman who came to this world to do good is sexually abused on day one by a celebrated hero, in the very headquarters of the most admired team on the planet. And the threat that traps her is the loss of the dream she worked her whole life for. What happens next is the part that proves this is a world problem and not a single bad man. Nothing happens to the Deep. He is protected because he is a valuable product and she is a newcomer. The company would rather keep its famous hero shining than protect the frightened girl he hurt. Annie quickly learns the rule that governs this entire world. The powerful are shielded. The decent are silenced. A good person trying to do the right thing is the odd one out, the strange one, the one who gets stepped on. In Walt's world, a good person was normal and a monster had to hide. In Annie's world, the monsters stand in the spotlight and the good have to learn to keep quiet to survive. The deepest layer of the rot, though, sits underneath even the cover-ups and the abuse, and the show saves it for a gut-punch reveal. The entire world of the boys is built on a lie about where the heroes come from. The public believes these gods were born special, chosen, blessed, that their powers are a miracle or a gift from above. That belief is what makes people worship them, and it is false from top to bottom. The truth is that the powers come from a drug, a special liquid called Compound V. Long ago, during World War II, A Nazi scientist cooked up the first version of it as a way to turn ordinary soldiers into super soldiers. The company that grew out of his work, Vought, kept making it and improving it for decades. There is no miracle, and there is no gift from heaven. There is a chemical made by a company with a dark and ugly history. Worse than that is how Vought uses it. The company quietly ships Compound V to hospitals, where newborn babies are injected with it, with their parents agreeing to it in secret. Those babies grow up with powers, and Vought raises them, trains them, and sells them to the public as gods. Then the company tells the whole world a lie, that these powers are natural, God-given, a wonderful leap forward for mankind. The reason for the lie is simple and cold. A natural-born God is something to worship and pay for. A baby that got a needle from a company is something people would question, fear, and maybe even sue over. So Vought hides the needle and sells the miracle. Sit with what that means, because it is the whole world summed up in one secret. The heroes everyone loves are not blessed. They are manufactured, like cars or cereal, by a company that drugged infants and then built a religion of lies around the result. The adoration the public feels, the screaming crowds, the costumes on the children, all of it rests on a foundation that is rotten through and through. The corruption in this world is not a stain on an otherwise clean place. The corruption is the floor everyone is standing on. It was poured into the foundation before any single hero ever did a single bad thing. And that points to the cleanest way to weigh this world against Walt's. In Breaking Bad, a person had to choose to become corrupt, and the world fought against that choice the whole way. In The Boys, a person is born into a machine that is already corrupt, already lying, already protecting its monsters, and the world fights against anyone who tries to do good. Annie did not choose to fall the way Walt did. Annie was simply dropped into a world that was already broken. And her struggle is not about resisting some hunger inside her own heart. Her struggle is about staying decent at all, while everything around her rewards cruelty and punishes kindness. The good people in The Boys are real, and that is important to say. Annie keeps trying to do right, even when it costs her. Huey, the boy who lost Robin, joins a small group of ordinary humans trying to fight back against the abusive heroes. There are people in this world with good hearts. The bleak truth the show keeps proving, season after season, is that those good hearts have almost no power. The company is too big. The heroes are too strong. The law cannot touch them. The public loves them too blindly. A good person in this world can fight and bleed and sometimes win a small battle. But the machine grinds on, and it was built long before they showed up. That is what makes it a corrupt world, and not merely a world with some corrupt people in it. So now, both halves of the question have a face. Breaking Bad puts forward one man poisoning a clean world from the inside, hunted every step of the way by a society that never lost its sense of right and wrong. The Boys puts forward a clean person, trying to survive inside a poisoned world, where the killers are protected, the abusers are celebrated, and the whole shining religion of heroes is a lie, sitting on top of drugged babies and a dead Nazi scientist's recipe. Two very different shapes of rot. One lives in a heart. The other lives in the air everyone breathes. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is, however, a piece of this world that has not been examined yet, and it might be the most dangerous piece of all. Vought built its heroes to be products it could control, smiling faces it could point wherever it wanted. But the company made one creation so powerful that it slipped the leash. There is a man in a flag-colored suit who can fly, who can melt steel with a look, and who answers to no one, not even the company that made him. What that man chose to do, thousands of feet in the air, on a falling airplane full of helpless people, reveals exactly how much an ordinary human life is worth in this world. And the answer is colder than anything Walter White ever did. Section 4. The God Who Answers to No One. His name is Homelander, and to the public, he is the greatest hero who has ever lived. He wears a suit colored like the flag, with a cape that streams behind him as he flies. He can soar through the sky faster than a jet. He can melt steel beams with a look from his eyes. He is so tough that bullets bounce off him like raindrops. He has a square jaw and a warm smile and a calm, fatherly voice, and the whole world believes he is the kindest and strongest protector they could ever ask for. That smile is the most dangerous lie in this entire story, because behind it sits a man who feels almost nothing for the people who worship him, and who can kill any one of them whenever he pleases. Homelander is the crown jewel of the company called Vought. He is the leader of the top hero team and the face on the biggest billboards. The company made him, raised him, and turned him into a god to sell to the public. There is one problem the company never solved, though, and it is the scariest fact about this world. Vought built a being far too powerful to control. The company can manage the weaker heroes like products on a shelf. Homelander is past managing. He does what he wants, and the people who supposedly run him have learned to be terrified of him. That fear is well earned. When the company woman who handled him, named Madeline Stillwell, finally tells him a lie he cannot forgive, he simply melts her face off with his eyes and walks away. The company that created him cannot punish him, cannot fire him, and cannot stop him. They can only smile and pray he stays in a good mood. The clearest window into who Homelander truly is opens in the 4th episode of the 1st season, high above the ocean, on a doomed airplane. A passenger plane called Transoceanic Flight 37 has been taken over by hijackers in the middle of a long flight. The company sees a golden chance to show the world how badly people need superheroes, so it sends Homelander and another famous hero, a strong and capable woman named Queen Maeve, to fly up and save the day. The two of them break into the plane and fight the hijackers. They win that part easily. The hijackers are no match for them. Then everything falls apart. And it falls apart because of Homelander. While killing the last hijacker in the cockpit, he fires his I-beams and destroys the plane's controls in the process. Now the plane cannot be flown. The pilots are dead. The controls are wrecked. The aircraft is going to fall out of the sky and into the sea, and every man, woman, and child aboard is going to die, unless the two gods standing in the aisle do something. Maeve turns to Homelander, ready to act. She tells him to lift the plane and carry it down safely. Homelander says he cannot. He explains that something that large and heavy is too much for him to hold while flying, because up in the open air, there is nothing solid for him to brace himself against. Maybe that is true. Maybe it is an excuse. What he does next removes any doubt about the kind of person he is. Maeve will not give up. She begs him. If he cannot save everyone, she pleads, then save at least a few of them, even just one little girl and her mother. Fly them out. Carry the child to safety. Homelander refuses. His reason is the coldest thing in either of these two shows, and it has nothing to do with strength or weight or what is possible. He refuses because a survivor would talk. A rescued child would grow up and tell the world that the great Homelander destroyed the plane and then ran, leaving everyone else to drown. That story would ruin his shining image and embarrass the company. So he decides that it is cleaner, safer for his reputation, if nobody walks away at all. A living witness is a problem. A plane load of corpses at the bottom of the ocean tells no tales. The passengers can see what is about to happen. They begin to panic, crying and reaching toward the two heroes, begging them not to leave. And Homelander, the beloved protector, the fatherly face on every billboard, turns on them and screams. He warns the terrified, doomed people to stay back, threatening to burn them with his eyes if they come any closer. The people who spent their whole lives loving and trusting him are now being threatened by him in their final moments, while he stands there, deciding their deaths are the tidy option. Then he and Maeve fly out the door, and the plane drops into the sea, and everyone on it dies. That is the act laid bare. Now look at how the world treats it afterward, because that is the real point. Homelander does not hide in shame. He does not run from the law. There is no manhunt. Instead, the company spins the tragedy into a victory. Homelander tells the public a flat lie, that he and Maeve arrived too late and the plane had already crashed before they could reach it. Then the company uses the dead passengers as an argument. See what happens, they say, when superheroes are not allowed to act freely. Let us put heroes into the military, give them more power, and tragedies like this will never happen again. The murder of an entire plane full of people becomes a sales pitch. The blood becomes a billboard. Set that beside Walter White one more time, because the gap between the two could not be wider. When Walt killed, he had to hide the bodies, lie to his family, and stay one step ahead of the police, because his world treated every death as the crime it was. Walt was hunted to his grave. Homelander kills dozens of innocent people out of pure concern for his own image, and the world hands him a microphone and a stage, and a louder cheer than before. Walt's world punished its monster. Homelander's world protects, polishes, and promotes its monster. The same kind of evil produces opposite results, and the difference is the world, not the man. This is also where the comparison gets sharper than just counting crimes. On a person-to-person level, some of Walt's acts are genuinely as cruel as Homelander's, or even crueler. Poisoning a child is a horror. But Walt did his horrors in the dark, knowing they were wrong, in a world that agreed they were wrong. Homelander commits his horror in plain view of his trusted partner, feels no shame about it, and lives in a world so bent that the act gets rewritten into heroism by morning. The question of this video was never which show has worse individual moments. The question is, which world is rotten? And a world that turns the murder of a plane full of families into a recruiting ad is rotten in a way that Walt's world simply never becomes. There is something even more chilling buried in Homelander's reasoning, and it deserves a careful look. The only thing holding him back on that plane was fear of being exposed. He did not spare the passengers out of mercy, because he has none. He killed them out of caution. In his mind, the danger was not the dying people, but the surviving ones, the witnesses who might damage his good name. That tells the truth about what an ordinary human life is worth to him. A life is worth less than his reputation. Dozens of people weighed against a smudge on his image, and the image won without a second thought. To Homelander, regular people are not really people at all. They are an audience, useful only as long as they keep clapping, and disposable the instant they become inconvenient. Hold on to that one word, though, because it is the crack in his armor. Caution. Fear of being caught. In these early days, Homelander still believes he has to hide his cruelty. He still lies, still covers up, still worries about what the public would do if they ever saw the real him. He threatens the passengers in private and then puts on his hero face for the cameras. Underneath all that godlike power sits a small, needy man who is desperate to be loved and afraid of losing it. For now, that fear is the leash. It is the one thing that keeps him pretending to be good. As long as he believes the public would turn against a monster, he keeps the monster mostly hidden. So the world of the boys has now shown 3 of its broken layers. The company lies and protects its killers. The god it built feels nothing for the people and answers to no one. And both of those truths have been carefully hidden from the public, because everyone in power still assumes that ordinary people would be horrified if they ever saw it all clearly. That assumption is the last thread of decency anyone is counting on. It rests on the hope that the regular folks, the fans, the crowds, are still good at heart, still capable of being shocked, still able to tell a hero from a butcher. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. A day is coming when that thread snaps. Standing in front of a roaring crowd with his own son beside him, Homelander is going to do something monstrous in full view of everyone, with no lie and no cover and no place to hide. And in the few seconds that follow, he is going to learn the most terrifying lesson of his life. A lesson not about himself, but about every single person staring up at him. What that crowd does next is the moment the rot finishes spreading, reaching past the company and past the god, and into the hearts of the ordinary people. And it answers this video's question more loudly than any murder ever could. Section 5. The day the crowd cheered. A crowd is gathered outside the tall glass tower where the most famous heroes live and work. It is the end of the 3rd season of The Boys, and these people are not ordinary passers-by. They are fans of Homelander, true believers who have bought into everything he stands for. They wave flags, they wear shirts with his face on them. They have come to see their hero, and on this day, he gives them something special. He brings out his young son, Ryan, and holds him up beside himself, a god introducing the public to the boy who will one day inherit his power. The crowd roars with love. For a moment, it looks like a sweet family scene, a father proudly showing off his child. To understand why what happens next matters so much, the leash has to be remembered. All through the early part of the show, the one thing holding Homelander back was fear. He could destroy anyone he liked, but he believed he had to hide it, because he believed that the public would turn against him the second they saw the real monster underneath the smile. That fear is the only reason he ever bothered pretending to be good. On the doomed airplane, he killed in secret and lied about it, precisely because he assumed the world would be horrified by the truth. His whole life of cover-ups rested on one quiet hope shared by everyone in power. The hope that the regular people, the fans, the crowds, were still decent at heart. As long as that was true, even a god had to behave. So here stands Homelander, in broad daylight, in front of hundreds of cameras and thousands of fans, with his son at his side. In the crowd, one man is angry. He is there to protest, and he shouts out that Homelander is a fascist, which is a word for a cruel leader who rules by fear and crushes anyone who dares to disagree. Then someone throws an object, and it strikes Ryan, the boy. Homelander reacts in an instant. Without a flicker of thought, he turns his eyes on the man who threw it and fires his heat beams, and the man's head bursts apart in front of everyone. A living, breathing human being is executed on the spot, in public, with no trial and no warning. simply for throwing something at a rally. For a few long seconds, nothing happens. The crowd goes silent. Homelander stands there, and for the first time in the entire series, real fear flashes across his face. This is the moment he has spent his whole life dreading. He has finally done the unthinkable in plain sight. Murdered an unarmed person in front of the world. And now he waits for the horror, the screaming, the turning away. He waits for the public to finally see the butcher behind the hero and reject him. The leash, the only thing that ever controlled him, is about to either hold or snap. It snaps. One man in the crowd, a devoted fan named Todd, slowly begins to clap. Then another joins him. Then another. And then the whole crowd erupts, not in horror, but in joy. They cheer, they celebrate, they love him for it. The people watched a man's head get blown off for the crime of being annoying, and their answer was applause. Homelander, who had braced himself to be hated, sees the cheering faces and the raised fists, and the fear on his face melts into a slow, delighted smile. He understands, in that instant, that the leash was never real. The public will not punish him. The public will reward him. He can do anything he wants now, anything at all, in the bright light of day, and the crowd will love him more for it. And then the camera finds the boy. Ryan, standing beside his father, watches the cheering mob and the murdered man and his smiling dad, and slowly, a little smile creeps across the child's face too. That small, awful smile is the last image of the season, and it carries a warning that goes far beyond one killing. The rot is not stopping with Homelander. It is being handed down. A new little god is learning, right there, that this is how the world works, and that this is what gets you loved. This single scene answers the central question of this whole video more clearly than any pile of bodies ever could. Up to this point, the corruption of the boys lived in two places. It lived in the company, which lied and covered up and protected its monsters. And it lived in the god, Homelander, who felt nothing for the people beneath him. But all of that was built on top of one last assumption. The belief that the ordinary public was still good, still able to be shocked, still the part of the world that had not gone rotten. The crowd outside that tower destroys that belief completely. The rot has finished spreading. It has soaked all the way down, past the company and past the hero, and into the hearts of the everyday people. The fans are no longer being fooled by a monster. They have seen the monster clearly, and they have decided they like him that way. That is what makes this a truly corrupt world, in the deepest sense of the word. A world is not rotten simply because it contains evil people. Every world contains some evil people, including Walter White's world. A world becomes rotten when the evil stops being hidden and shameful and starts being popular. When cruelty is something to cheer for instead of something to fear. When the crowd in the public square claps for an execution. By that measure, the world of the boys has fallen as far as a world can fall. The people themselves, the ones who are supposed to be the last line of decency, have joined the side of the monster. The men who made the show were very clear about what they were trying to say with this moment, and it makes the scene even heavier. The creator has openly explained that the cheering crowd was meant to echo something real, a moment from actual life, when a famous politician once boasted that he could shoot somebody in the middle of a busy street and his supporters would not abandon him. They would stick by him anyway. The show took that dark boast and made it literally true on screen. The point being made is not really about superheroes at all. The point is a warning about real people. about how a crowd can fall so deeply in love with a strong figure that they will forgive him anything, even murder. Even murder they watched with their own eyes. The superpowers are just the costume. The frightening part is the cheering, because the cheering does not need any superpowers to happen in the real world. Now place that crowd next to Walter White and let the comparison finish itself. Across 5 whole seasons, Walt does terrible things every bit as cruel as anything Homelander does, and not once does a crowd ever cheer for him. Not once. His world never throws him a rally. His murders are never turned into a reason to love him more. When the truth about Walt finally comes out, the response from every direction is exactly what a sane world should produce. The police hunt him harder. The news treats him as a villain. His own son comes to hate him. His wife is broken by what he has become. His brother-in-law, the drug agent, dies trying to bring him in. The entire society around Walt, every single layer of it, points in the same direction. And that direction is that what Walter White did was wrong and must be stopped. There is no Todd in Walt's world, starting a slow clap for the killer. There are only people trying to catch him. That contrast is the spine of the answer. 2 men, both monsters in their own way. One lives in a world that hunts him for his crimes until it destroys him. The other lives in a world that hunts down anyone who criticizes him and cheers when he murders in the street. The crimes might be similar in their cruelty, but the worlds could not be more different in how they respond. A world that condemns its monster is a world that still has a working sense of right and wrong, even when it fails to win. A world that celebrates its monster has lost that sense entirely. The first world is good and is being attacked from the inside by a bad man. The second world has gone bad all the way through. There is one more layer to the horror of the cheering crowd, and it is the way it traps the good people completely. In Breaking Bad, the good people had power. The police had power. The agents had power. The law had teeth. And it eventually caught the monster. In The Boys, that scene proves the good people have run out of road. The hero called Starlight, the kind young woman, has spent the whole series trying to expose Homelander and warn the public about what he really is. After the crowd cheers his murder, what is left for her to do? She cannot appeal to a public that just applauded a killing. She cannot count on a law that bows to the strongest. She cannot wake people up who have chosen to stay asleep with their eyes wide open. The good people in this world are not just outnumbered. They are abandoned by the very public they are trying to save. That is the loneliest kind of defeat there is. So the case for the boys having the more corrupt world is now fully built, and it is a strong one. The company is rotten. The God is rotten. The foundation, the drugged babies and the lie about gifts from heaven is rotten. And in the end, the public is rotten too, clapping for blood in the open air, while the few good souls left can only watch in despair. There is no clean layer anywhere in it. From the boardroom at the top to the crowd at the bottom, the whole structure leans toward protecting cruelty and punishing kindness. That is a world that has been corrupt from its very roots, long before any single character ever made a single choice. Holding all of that up, it would be easy to bang the gavel right now and declare the contest over. The Boys, by a landslide, has the more corrupt world. And that answer would be mostly right. But mostly right is not the same as fully honest. And a fair look at this question demands one more hard examination before any final verdict gets handed down. Because the picture painted of Breaking Bad so far has been a little too neat. The world of Walter White has been described as clean, lawful, and sane. A good place, fighting off one bad man. That is true of the bright surface of that world, the schools and the police and the quiet neighborhoods. It is not the whole truth. Underneath those quiet streets of Albuquerque runs a second world, a hidden one, with its own kings and its own laws and its own kind of God. In that buried world, a man can have his throat cut wide open for nothing more than a small mistake, while his co-workers are ordered to keep their eyes down and get back to work. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. In that buried world, a smiling young man can shoot a child dead in an open field for the crime of riding a bike past the wrong spot at the wrong moment, and then calmly explain that it had to be done. The question that comes next is whether that hidden underworld inside Breaking Bad is every bit as rotten as the public squares of the boys, and what the answer reveals about the strange and important difference between a world where the rot is hidden in the dark and a world where the rot dances in the daylight to the sound of a cheering crowd. Section 6. The World Beneath the World. The story so far has been kind to Breaking Bad. Its world was painted as a clean, lawful place, a good society fighting off one bad man who was poisoning it from the inside. That description is honest about the surface, about the schools and the police and the quiet streets where families live. It leaves out the basement. Beneath the bright, normal city of Albuquerque runs a second world, hidden and dark, with its own rulers and its own savage rules. And the people down there are every bit as cruel as anyone in the boys. To answer this video's question fairly, that hidden world has to be dragged up into the light and looked at without flinching. The clearest face of that buried world is a man named Gus Fring. And Gus is one of the most chilling figures in all of television. On the surface, he is a model citizen. He owns a chain of cheerful fried chicken restaurants, and he stands behind the counter in a clean shirt, polite and soft-spoken, helping customers with a gentle smile. He gives money to good causes. He throws fundraising dinners. He is even friendly with the local drug agents, donating to their events and shaking their hands. The picture of a kind and successful businessman who loves his community. Everyone who meets the daytime Gus walks away thinking what a decent man he is. That gentle restaurant owner is a complete disguise. The real Gus Fring is the cold, careful boss of an enormous drug operation. And the chicken business is simply a clever mask he wears to hide the blood. He has spent decades building both halves of his life, the public saint and the private butcher. And the entire point of the disguise is that the two must never touch. The friendly chicken man exists so that the drug lord can survive. And the moment that proves exactly how ruthless the hidden Gus can be comes at the start of the 4th season, in a scene that still makes longtime fans wince. Walt and Jesse have just disobeyed Gus in a terrible way, forcing his hand by killing a chemist he was planning to replace them with. Now Gus has them trapped in his secret underground lab, and he comes down to deal with them. With him is Victor, one of his most loyal and trusted men, a fellow who has served him faithfully for years and who has done nothing wrong except be seen by witnesses at the scene of the chemist's murder. Walt and Jesse expect Gus to kill one of them, or both. Instead, Gus calmly puts on a protective suit, picks up a small box cutter, the kind of cheap blade used to open cardboard boxes, and walks over to his own loyal man. Then he cuts Victor's throat wide open and holds him up while he bleeds to death on the floor, all while staring directly into Walt's eyes the entire time, saying nothing. Sit with the meaning of that. Gus did not kill Victor out of anger. and not really as punishment for a crime, since Victor's only fault was being spotted. He killed his faithful servant as a message, a warning to Walt and Jesse about what happens to people who become a problem for him. He spent a loyal man's life the way someone else might spend a coin, just to make a point. And once it is done, once Victor is dead on the floor, Gus calmly changes out of the bloody suit, puts his neat businessman clothes back on, and tells the two horrified men only one thing, which is to get back to work. Then he walks back up the stairs to his clean, smiling, public life. That is the true Gus Fring, and on a cold, person-to-person level, that act is as brutal as anything Homelander ever does. Gus is not alone down in that hidden world either. It is crowded with monsters. There is a violent young man named Todd who joins Walt's crew during a robbery to steal the supplies they need to cook their drug. After the robbery goes off without a hitch, the men are celebrating in an empty stretch of desert when a boy rides up on a dirt bike. He is about 14 years old, and he has simply wandered into the wrong place at the wrong moment, having seen what the men just did. The boy waves at them, friendly and unsure. Todd waves back. Then, without a flicker of hesitation, Todd pulls out a gun and shoots the child dead, killing him on the spot to make sure there are no witnesses. Afterward, the men dissolve the boy's body in acid to erase him, and Todd cannot understand why anyone is upset. To him, the child was simply a loose end that needed tying off. Beyond Gus and Todd, the hidden world stretches even further into darkness. There are the drug cartels south of the border, packed with killers who torture and murder without a second thought. There is a gang of violent racists, a brotherhood of men covered in hateful tattoos who run their cruelty out of the prisons and who will slaughter anyone for the right price. This buried society has its own kings, its own soldiers, and its own laws, and those laws are written in blood. A small mistake gets a loyal man's throat cut. A glance from a passing child earns a bullet. Down in that world, life is cheap and mercy is rare, and the rules are every bit as savage as the rules that govern the heroes and the company in The Boys. So an honest look forces a clear admission. Breaking Bad does not have a spotless world. It has a deeply rotten pocket buried inside it, full of people as evil as any superhero villain. If the question were simply whether Breaking Bad contains cruelty as ugly as The Boys, the answer would be yes, plainly yes. But that was never quite the question. The question is about the world itself, about how the whole place is built and how it behaves. And once the hidden world of Breaking Bad is looked at closely, a crucial difference appears, and that difference decides everything. The rot in Breaking Bad is hidden, and it is hunted. That is the whole point. Gus Fring has to wear a mask precisely because his world would destroy him the instant it saw his real face. His chicken restaurants, his charity dinners, his friendly handshakes with the drug agents. Every bit of that disguise exists for one reason, which is that the world around him still has standards, still believes in right and wrong, and would tear him apart if it ever learned the truth. The drug agents he smiles at would arrest him in a heartbeat if they knew. The community that admires him would turn on him in disgust. His entire survival depends on the good world above never finding out what he really is. The brutality only works in the dark, and the moment the light reaches it, it dies. That is the opposite of how The Boys works, and the difference becomes blinding when Gus Fring is set right next to Homelander. Both men are monsters who lead from the top. Both kill without mercy when it serves them. But Gus must spend his whole life hiding behind a gentle mask because his world would never accept the truth. Homelander gets to rip his mask off in the middle of a public square, murder a man in front of thousands of people, and receive a standing ovation for it. The same kind of evil, born into two different worlds, produces two opposite lives. In one world, the monster has to crouch in the shadows and pretend to be good just to stay alive. In the other world, the monster gets to stand in the sun and be loved for being a monster. That single comparison holds the answer to this entire video inside it. The hunting matters just as much as the hiding. All through Breaking Bad, the good world is actively chasing the bad world, trying to dig it out and destroy it. The drug agents work day and night to crack the cases. Walt's own brother-in-law spends years closing in on the very operation Walt is running, never knowing how close to home it sits. Gus Fring, for all his cleverness and all his power, is eventually exposed and killed, his empire torn down. Walt, the great drug lord, is hunted to his death. Todd and the racist gang are gunned down in the end. Every single monster in that hidden world is, sooner or later, caught and destroyed, because the larger world they live in never stops treating them as a sickness to be cured. The rot is real, but the body it lives in is healthy enough to fight back. And in time, the body wins. Nothing like that ever happens in The Boys. The monsters there are not hunted by their world. They are protected by it, celebrated by it, and put on billboards by it. The company shields them. The law bows to them. The public cheers for them. The few good people who try to fight back are not the agents of a healthy world hunting down a disease. They are lonely outsiders, almost powerless, struggling against a whole society that has chosen the side of the monsters. In Breaking Bad, evil has to hide because the world is good. In The Boys, goodness has to hide because the world is evil. That flip is the heart of the matter. So the refined and honest answer takes shape. Breaking Bad has terrible people, and it even has a small, hidden world that is genuinely rotten. A buried place as cruel as anything in The Boys. But that rot is sealed off in the dark, forced to wear disguises, and hunted without mercy by a larger world that never loses its grip on right and wrong. The corruption in Breaking Bad is a disease in an otherwise living body. And the body spends the whole story fighting the infection and finally beating it. The corruption in The Boys is not a disease at all. It is the body itself. There is no healthy layer left to fight back because the company, the heroes, and the public have all gone the same rotten way together. To reach the deepest part of the buried world in Breaking Bad, a person has to climb down into basements and drive out to empty deserts and step into prison yards. The rot does not come looking for the ordinary citizen. It hides from him. In The Boys, the rot is broadcast on every screen and shouted from every stage, impossible to escape, dancing in the daylight to the sound of a cheering crowd. One world makes a person descend to find its evil. The other world delivers its evil to everyone, gift-wrapped and smiling. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And yet, even after granting Breaking Bad its hidden pit of monsters, there is one more piece of evidence buried in that desert scene that points straight back toward the final answer. And it has nothing to do with the killing itself. It has to do with what happened right after the boy on the bike was shot. Because down in the cruelest corner of Breaking Bad's hidden world, surrounded by hardened criminals and killers, the murder of that innocent child did not get a single cheer. It got something else entirely. Something that the world of The Boys, with all its roaring crowds, seems to have completely lost the ability to feel. What the men in that desert did in the moments after the gunshot is where this whole long question finally finds its answer. Section 7. The line even criminals would not cross. The gunshot in the desert cracks across the empty land. And then there is silence. The boy on the dirt bike crumples to the ground, dead in an instant, killed for the simple crime of having seen something he should not have seen. Todd stands there having just murdered a child, lowering his gun as if he had done nothing more than swat a fly. The robbery is finished. The supplies are stolen. By the cold logic of the criminal world, the job was a perfect success, with the only witness now silenced forever. And it is what happens in the next few moments among these hardened criminals that splits this whole question wide open and reveals its true answer. Jesse Pinkman, Walt's young partner, comes apart at the seams. He had screamed at Todd to stop before the trigger was pulled, and now he stares at the small dead body in pure horror, his whole face collapsing. This is a young man who sells drugs for a living, who has been around violence for years, who is no innocent himself. And the sight of that murdered child wrecks him. He cannot accept it. He cannot brush it off. Something deep inside him, some stubborn sense of right and wrong that all his crimes never managed to kill, rises up and refuses to let this stand. The killing does not register to Jesse as the smart move or the necessary cost of doing business. It registers as a horror, an unforgivable thing, a line that should never, ever have been crossed. Mike, the older, tougher member of the crew, a man who has killed many people in his long criminal career, is just as disgusted. He is a stone-cold professional, hard as they come, and even he is sickened by what Todd did. When the men gather afterward to deal with the fallout, Todd tries to explain himself, calmly defending the murder as something that simply had to be done to protect them all. He talks about it the way someone might talk about taking out the trash. And Jesse, unable to stand another second of that empty, reasonable voice, hauls off and punches Todd right in the face. The blow is not really about strategy or safety. The blow is the only language Jesse has left for the rage and grief he feels. A fist thrown at a person who could murder a child and feel absolutely nothing about it. The damage does not stop with a single punch. The murder of that boy poisons everything. It cracks the crew apart from the inside. Both Jesse and Mike decide they want out of the whole operation, even though staying would have made each of them millions of dollars. Jesse is so haunted by what happened, so unable to live with being part of it, that he walks away from a fortune. He would rather have nothing and keep what is left of his soul than grow rich standing next to a child killer. The death of that one innocent boy does more to destroy Walt's empire from within than any drug agent ever managed from without. It is the wound that will not heal. Pay close attention to what all of this proves, because it is the key to the entire video. The men in that desert are not good people. They are drug dealers, robbers, and killers, living in the darkest, most hidden pit of Breaking Bad's world. They are about as far from heroes as a person can get. And even down there, at the very bottom, the murder of an innocent child still crossed a line. It still produced horror. It still sparked rage. It still broke a man's heart and shattered the group. The worst people in Breaking Bad's world still had a sense, buried deep but alive, that some things are simply not allowed. That killing a child is a kind of evil that even criminals are supposed to recoil from. Their world, even at its filthiest and most violent, still had a floor beneath which a person was not meant to fall. That sense of a line is carried through the whole show by Jesse Pinkman, who serves as the conscience of the underworld. Across every season, Jesse is the one who cannot stop feeling the weight of the innocent people who get hurt. The death of Jane haunts him for years. The death of a different young boy, killed earlier in the story by other dealers, nearly destroys him. Drew, the boy on the bike, becomes one more ghost he carries. Jesse does terrible things, and he pays for them in guilt that eats him alive, because some stubborn, decent part of him never stops knowing the difference between right and wrong. He is living proof that even inside the rotten pocket of Breaking Bad's world, a conscience can survive. The darkness never fully wins down there. There is always at least one person, and usually more than one, who looks at the murder of an innocent and feels sick. Even the worst of them shows the line by the way the others treat him. Todd, the young man who shot the boy without blinking, is not celebrated for it. The others do not pat him on the back. They look at him with disgust and unease, because his total emptiness, his ability to murder a child and feel nothing, marks him as something broken, something wrong, even by the standards of criminals. Jesse punches him. Mike can barely stand to be near him. Todd's lack of any conscience at all makes him a kind of monster to the other monsters. The fact that the killers around him are horrified by him tells the whole story. In Breaking Bad's world, feeling nothing about a dead child is the mark of something deeply broken, not something normal. Walt is the most troubling case, and an honest look has to admit it. Of the three men, Walt is the least disturbed by Drew's death. He treats it as a grim cost, a sad but acceptable price for keeping the operation safe. His coldness in that moment is one more sign of how far he has fallen, how much of his old self he has burned away. But even Walt does not cheer. Even Walt does not celebrate. And most importantly of all, even Walt has to hide it. He knows, deep down, that the world around him would see that dead boy as a horror and a crime. He knows the agents would hunt him harder for it. He knows his own family would be sickened. Walt's acceptance of the murder is a private rot, swallowed in silence, kept secret from a world that he understands would never approve. The line still exists. Walt is simply choosing, alone and in the dark, to step over it. Now take that desert scene, with all its horror and grief and the thrown punch and the broken crew, and set it directly beside the other scene, the one outside the glass tower in The Boys. In that scene, a powerful man murders an innocent person in public, with no warning and no mercy. Exactly the kind of killing that wrecked Jesse Pinkman in the desert. The act is the same in its cruelty. A defenseless human being is killed in an instant by someone far more powerful, for a reason that does not come close to justifying it. The difference is in what the watching world does next. And that difference is everything. In the desert, hardened criminals reacted with horror, rage, grief, and a fist to the face of the killer. Outside the tower, a crowd of ordinary people reacted with silence, then with clapping, then with cheering, then with joy. The criminals of Breaking Bad, the worst people in their world, recoiled from the murder of an innocent. The everyday citizens of The Boys, the supposed good people in their world, applauded it. One world's villains had more decency about the death of an innocent than the other world's heroes and crowds. Sit with that, because it is the sharpest single fact in this entire comparison. The drug dealers of Breaking Bad were more horrified by murder than the cheering fans of The Boys. This reveals the real way to measure how corrupt a world is, and it is not by counting the bodies. Both worlds are stuffed with bodies. The true measure is whether the world still has a line, whether it still recoils, whether the death of an innocent can still produce horror in the people who witness it. A world keeps its soul as long as cruelty still shocks it, as long as murder still sparks grief and rage, as long as there remains some floor that people are not supposed to fall beneath. A world loses its soul when cruelty stops shocking anyone, when murder becomes a reason to cheer, when the floor drops away and there is nothing left to fall beneath. By that measure, the answer becomes clear and hard to argue with. Breaking Bad's world, from its brightest streets all the way down to its darkest criminal pit, still has a line. The good people defend it. The law enforces it. And astonishingly, even the criminals feel it. Even the killers recoil when a child is murdered in front of them. The horror is still alive, everywhere in that world, top to bottom. The world of the boys has lost that line at every level. The company feels no horror, only concern for its image. The god feels no horror, only annoyance at being inconvenienced. And the public, the last hope, the ones who are supposed to still be good, feel no horror either. They feel delight. When the floor finally dropped away in the boys, there was a cheering crowd standing on the edge, applauding the fall. So the central question of this video now has a real answer, built carefully and honestly, with the counter-arguments faced head-on rather than dodged. The Boys depicts a more morally corrupt world than Breaking Bad. The reason is not that it contains worse individual crimes, because on a person-to-person level, Breaking Bad easily matches it, with poisoned children and slit throats, and a boy shot dead in the dirt. The reason is that Breaking Bad's world, even while crawling with evil people, never stopped knowing those acts were evil, never stopped hunting them, never stopped recoiling from them. The Boys built a world where evil is the system itself, where the powerful are protected and the public claps for blood, and the few good souls left are abandoned and powerless. One world fights its rot and eventually wins. The other world has become its rot, all the way through, with no healthy part left to fight back. That conclusion feels solid, and it deserves to. It accounts for the surface and the underworld of both shows, for the heroes and the villains, for the company and the crowd. It explains why Gus Fring had to hide while Homelander got to perform. It explains why a thrown punch in a desert says more about a world's soul than 1,000 corpses ever could. By the plainest meaning of the words, the Boys is the more corrupt world, and the cheering crowd is the proof. And yet, settling the question this way leaves a strange and uneasy feeling, like an answer that is correct on paper, but somehow does not capture the whole truth, because there is a harder question hiding underneath the one that was just answered, and pulling on it threatens to turn the entire conclusion upside down. The Boys shows a broken world, a world clearly worse than ours, full of gods and lasers and cheering mobs that no one will ever actually meet on the street. It is a nightmare set safely at a distance. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Breaking Bad shows something that might be far more frightening, precisely because it is so much closer to home. It shows a kind, ordinary, harmless schoolteacher, a man with a wife and a son and a mortgage, a man who could be any neighbor on any street, choosing all on his own, with no broken world pushing him, to become one of the most frightening monsters television has ever produced. If that is true, then perhaps the rot was never really in the world at all, in either show. Perhaps it was sleeping inside an ordinary human heart the entire time, waiting for the right moment to wake up. And that possibility is darker than any cheering crowd could ever be. Section 8. The Monster Next Door. The answer from the last section was clean, and clean answers deserve to be poked at, because real questions are rarely that tidy. The Boys has the more corrupt world, the reasoning held up. And yet a quiet, stubborn voice keeps whispering that the verdict, correct as it is, somehow missed the scariest part of the whole comparison. That voice is worth listening to, because following it threatens to turn the entire conclusion on its head. Here is the problem with crowning the boys as the more corrupt world and walking away satisfied. The world of the boys, for all its horror, is a nightmare kept at a safe distance. It is filled with things no one will ever actually meet. Men who fly, eyes that shoot lasers, a giant company that makes gods out of babies, a serum invented by a Nazi scientist that turns ordinary infants into living weapons. None of it is real, and none of it could ever happen to a regular person on a regular street. Watching the boys is like watching a monster movie. The horror is loud and bloody and shocking, but underneath it sits a comforting thought. That could never be me. I am not a flying god. I will never melt a man with my eyes. The monsters in the boys are a separate kind of creature, born different, made different, living in a cartoon world of capes and superpowers that has nothing to do with anyone's actual life. Breaking Bad offers no such comfort, and that is exactly what makes it so much more frightening underneath the surface. There are no superpowers in Breaking Bad. There is no magic serum and no flying. There is only a man. A mild, balding, middle-aged chemistry teacher with a bad car and a bigger mortgage than he can handle. A man who packs his son's lunch and grades homework and gets pushed around by life. A man who looks exactly like 100 harmless neighbors on 100 ordinary streets. And the entire show is the story of that completely normal man choosing, step by step, all on his own, to become one of the most terrifying figures television has ever created. No broken world forced him. No company drugged him as a baby. No cheering crowd egged him on. He simply decided, and kept deciding, until the gentle teacher was gone and a monster stood in his place. The man who made Breaking Bad was open about this from the start. He said his whole goal was to take a good, mild, decent person and slowly, carefully, turn him into a villain over the course of the show. The point of the entire series was to prove that the line between a kind man and a cruel one is far thinner than anyone wants to admit, and that a regular person can walk across it on his own 2 feet, one small choice at a time. That idea is the beating heart of the show, and it is a deeply disturbing idea, because it does not point at gods or companies or made-up worlds. It points at ordinary people. It points at the harmless neighbor, the quiet coworker, the gentle relative. It suggests the monster could be almost anyone, given enough pride and the right push, and that no superpowers are needed at all. The proof sits in Walt's final confession, the one he gives near the very end. For years, he insisted he did everything for his family, that he was a good man, making hard choices in a cruel situation. Then, at the close, he admits the truth to his wife. He did it for himself. He did it because it made him feel powerful and alive. Because for once, his small gray life felt big and important. The rot was never put into him by anything outside. It was inside him the whole time, sleeping under the surface of the mild school teacher, waiting for a reason to wake up. The cancer did not make him evil. The money troubles did not make him evil. They were only the alarm clock. The evil was already there, curled up and patient, the way it might be curled up and patient inside countless ordinary people who never get the wake-up call. Once that sinks in, a powerful case rises up against the earlier verdict. By a different and maybe deeper measure, Breaking Bad is the more disturbing show because its darkness is real and close and personal. The Boys shows a broken world that exists only in fantasy, a place no one will ever live in. Breaking Bad shows a broken man who could be living 3 doors down. A man whose entire journey is a warning about the darkness that may sleep inside regular human hearts. A cheering crowd of superhero fans is frightening in the moment, but it floats away the second the screen goes dark, because it belongs to a made-up world. The image of a kind teacher turning into a murderer lingers, because it whispers an ugly possibility about real life and real people that does not switch off when the show ends. So which is truly worse when everything is weighed honestly? A corrupt world full of obvious, fantastical monsters that no one could ever become? Or a good world that quietly reveals how easily an ordinary, harmless person can choose to become a monster all by themselves? The first is a louder nightmare. The second is a closer one. And there is a strong argument, a genuinely strong one, that the closer nightmare is the more corrupt vision of all, because it locates the rot not in some distant company or some impossible god, but in the plain human heart, which means it locates the rot everywhere, in everyone, hidden behind 1,000 friendly faces. That objection is real, and it would be dishonest to brush it aside. But following it carefully reveals something important, which is that the objection is quietly answering a different question than the one this video set out to answer. The title asked, which world is more morally corrupt? That is a question about the two worlds themselves, about how each place is built and how it behaves. The objection just raised is a different question entirely. It asks, which show tells the scarier truth about real human beings? Those two questions feel similar, but they are not the same, and mixing them up is the trap. When the two questions are kept separate, both can be answered cleanly, and the answers do not fight each other. On the first question, which world is more corrupt, the boys still wins, and wins clearly, for every reason already laid out. Its company is rotten, its god is rotten, its public cheers for murder, and there is no healthy layer left to fight back. Breaking Bad's world, even with its hidden pit of monsters, keeps its line, hunts its evil, and recoils from the death of an innocent. As worlds, as places, the boys is the more corrupt one. That answer holds. On the second question, which show tells a more frightening truth about people? Breaking Bad takes the crown, and takes it just as clearly. Its vision of a normal man choosing to fall is more intimate, more real, and more haunting than any number of flying villains. The boys can shock harder in the moment, but Breaking Bad reaches deeper and stays longer, because it is whispering about the viewer's own neighbors, and maybe about the viewer too. The genius of putting these two shows side by side is that they are strongest in two different ways. One builds the more corrupt world. The other tells the more corrupt truth about the human heart. And yet, even that neat division does not quite hold, because there is one more twist waiting, and it is the most interesting twist of all. The case for Breaking Bad being the scarier truth rested on the idea that The Boys is only a distant fantasy, a monster movie about gods and lasers with nothing to say about real people. That idea is wrong, and the men who made The Boys would be the first to say so. The real warning of The Boys was never about the gods at all. The flying and the lasers and the superpowers are just the costume. The thing the show is actually pointing at, the thing it truly wants people to be afraid of, is not Homelander. It is the crowd. Go back to that scene outside the tower one more time. The terrifying part of that moment was never the laser. A laser is make-believe, an effect on a screen, something no real person will ever face. The terrifying part was the cheering, The cheering needs no superpowers. The cheering could happen, and has happened, in the real world, again and again throughout history. Whenever a strong and flattering figure does something monstrous, and a crowd decides they love him for it. The men who made the show said this out loud, that the scene was built to echo a real moment from real life, when a real crowd was tested and chose to cheer. The gods are fantasy. The mob is not. The mob is as real as anything in Breaking Bad, and maybe more so. So The Boys, in the end, points at human nature too, just from a different direction. Breaking Bad puts its finger on the darkness inside the single person who chooses to fall. The Boys puts its finger on the darkness inside the many people who choose to cheer the fall. One show says a good man can become a monster on his own. The other says a crowd of good people can fall in love with a monster and clap for his cruelty. Both warnings are about real human beings. Both are close to home. Both refuse, in the end, to let the audience off the hook. Because both are quietly arguing that the rot was never really about the made-up world at all. That the made-up world was only a mirror held up to the people watching. That changes the shape of the whole comparison. It is no longer simply a contest between a corrupt world and a corrupt man. It has become a contest between two different truths about real human darkness. Breaking Bad warns about the danger that lives inside one heart, alone, in the quiet, choosing wrong with no one watching. The Boys warns about the danger that lives inside a crowd, many hearts together, choosing to celebrate wrong out loud while everyone watches and joins in. Both are real. Both have happened. Both will happen again. And which of those two darknesses is the more common, the more dangerous, the more honest reflection of how people actually behave, is no longer a question about superheroes or drug dealers at all. The earlier verdict still stands, and it should be stated plainly so it does not get lost. As worlds, The Boys is more corrupt than Breaking Bad, top to bottom, with no clean layer left. But the deeper a person digs into why these two shows hit so hard, the clearer it becomes that the real fight between them is happening on a different field entirely. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The real question hiding under the title is which show holds up the truer mirror to ordinary life? The one showing a single soul rotting in private, or the one showing a whole crowd rotting in public? That question matters far more than any tally of fictional bodies, because the answer to it says something about which kind of darkness is waiting in the real world, outside the screen, where there are no superpowers and no drug empires, only people and the choices they make when no one, or everyone, is watching. Section 9. One Heart and 1,000 Voices. Two pictures sit at the center of this whole comparison, and everything now comes down to deciding which of them tells the truer story about real human darkness. The first picture is a man alone, Walter White, standing in a quiet house, checking his watch while 10 men die far away on his orders, with no one beside him and no one watching, the evil done in silence and secret. The second picture is a crowd, hundreds of ordinary people outside a glass tower, roaring with joy as a man's head is blown off in front of them. The evil done out loud and together in the bright open air. One heart rotting in private, 1,000 voices rotting in public. The question is which of those two darknesses is the more dangerous, and which one looks more like the real world that exists outside the screen? Breaking Bad lives almost entirely in the first picture. Walt's corruption is a hidden thing from beginning to end. He lies to his wife for years, building a secret life she cannot see. He cooks his poison in basements and deserts and a lab buried under a laundry. He hides his money in barrels in the ground. When he orders his worst crime, the killing of 10 men in 2 minutes, he does it from the privacy of his own home, alone, watching the seconds tick by. His final confession, the admission that he did it all for himself because it made him feel alive, is spoken quietly to one person near the very end. Walt's whole journey into evil happens in the shadows, kept secret from a world he knows would condemn him. The rot grows in the dark, one private choice at a time, with no audience and no applause. Jesse carries that same private weight in his own way. His guilt over the innocent people harmed along the road is something he bears mostly alone, in the quiet of his own mind, eating away at him where no one can see. The conscience in Breaking Bad is a lonely thing. It lives inside single people, in private, and it does its suffering in private too. This is a show about what happens inside one human being when no one is looking, about the choices a person makes in the dark, when there is no one around to judge them and no crowd to please. That is its picture of human darkness. It is quiet, solitary, and hidden. The Boys lives in the second picture almost completely. Its corruption is loud, public, and shared by the many. The heroes are worshipped in giant public spectacles, their faces on billboards the size of buildings, their movies filling theaters, their rallies packed with screaming fans. Homelander's power does not come from hiding. It comes from the love of the crowd. His whole strength as a figure rests on the adoration of millions of ordinary people who choose, together, to make him a god. And the deepest horror of that world, the cheering after the murder, is the most public act imaginable. It is not one person sinning in secret. It is a multitude celebrating a killing as one body, out loud, with raised fists, in front of every camera in the world. The conscience that should have stopped them did not fail quietly in a single heart. It failed all at once, in a crowd, with everyone watching everyone else and deciding together that this was something to love. That difference is the key to the whole question, and history points hard toward one answer. A single rotten heart, acting alone in the dark, can only do so much damage. Walter White, at the very height of his power, ruined a handful of lives and built a drug empire that was eventually torn down. One man, even a brilliant and ruthless one, has limits. He has to hide. He has to sleep. He can be hunted, cornered, and stopped because the world around him still works and still wants to stop him. The lone monster is dangerous, but he is containable because everything outside his small circle is still pulling against him. A crowd is a different and far more terrible thing. The worst horrors in real human history were never the work of one lonely man choosing evil in private. They required crowds. They required thousands and millions of ordinary people agreeing to look away, to go along, to cheer, to follow, to do their small part without asking too many questions. A single cruel man is a problem. A cruel man with a cheering crowd behind him is a catastrophe, because the crowd gives him reach he could never have alone. And it does something even worse than that. It removes the thing that would otherwise stop him. This is the most important point in the entire comparison, and it brings everything back together. Earlier, the world of Breaking Bad was compared to a living body fighting off a disease. The evil was the infection, and the healthy world around it, the police, the agents, the families, the line that even criminals would not cross, was the body's defense, the guard that fought back and eventually won. That defense is what caught Walt. It is what tore down Gus Fring. It is what destroyed every monster in that world. The reason a lone, rotten heart can be stopped is that the healthy world around it keeps its guard, keeps its alarm, keeps its sense that this is wrong and must be fought. The cheering crowd is the thing that switches off that alarm. When a whole society stands up and celebrates a murder, the guard is gone. There is no longer a healthy world pulling against the monster because the world has joined him. The line that even Breaking Bad's criminals refuse to cross is exactly the line the crowd erases when it cheers. And once that line is gone, once the alarm is silenced, nothing can catch the monster anymore. Because catching him would require the very thing the crowd just destroyed, which is a shared sense that what he did was wrong. The lone faller is dangerous, but the world can still stop him. The cheering crowd is more dangerous, because the cheering crowd dismantles the world's ability to stop anyone at all. Watch how this plays out exactly in The Boys. For seasons, Homelander was held back by one single thing: his fear of the crowd's judgment. He was always a monster, always capable of anything, but he kept the monster hidden because he believed the public would turn on him if they saw it. The crowd, in those early days, was the alarm. It was the guard. As long as Homelander feared what ordinary people would think, he kept the leash on. The fear of being hated by the crowd was the only force on Earth strong enough to control a being who could melt steel with a glance. Then the crowd cheered, and in that instant, the leash dissolved. Because the one thing that controlled him had just told him it loved him exactly as he was. The crowd was the lock on the cage. The cheering was the crowd unlocking it from the inside and inviting the monster out. That is why the crowd's darkness is the more dangerous of the two, and the more frightening mirror of real life. The lone heart rotting in private, the Walter White story, is a tragedy. But it is a contained one, because the world stays sane around it and eventually closes in. The crowd rotting in public, the cheering mob, is not contained, because it destroys the very sanity that would contain it. A world with one Walt in it is still a fixable world. A world that cheers for Homelander is a world that has broken its own ability to be fixed. The disease is bad. A body that has stopped fighting the disease, that has started feeding it and cheering it on, is the true nightmare. And yet, the Breaking Bad mirror cannot be dismissed, because it captures something the crowd picture leaves out, something just as true. Every cheering crowd is made of individual hearts. The mob outside the tower was not born as a mob. It was assembled from hundreds of separate people, each of whom, at some private moment in their own life, made a small choice to stop questioning, to start following, to hand their conscience over to a strong and flattering figure. The crowd's public rot is built out of 1,000 private rots that happened first, quietly, in 1,000 separate hearts, long before those people ever gathered in one place to cheer. Breaking Bad shows the seed. The Boys shows the forest. The seed is one heart deciding, in private, that it is willing to look away from wrong. The forest is what grows when enough of those seeds find each other and discover they are not alone. This is where the two shows stop being rivals and start being two halves of a single, complete picture of human darkness. Breaking Bad explains how the rot begins. It begins inside one ordinary person, in private, with pride and resentment and the quiet wish to matter, in a choice made when no one is watching. The Boys explains how the rot ends. It ends with a crowd, in public, celebrating cruelty as one body, having lost the shared sense of right and wrong that once held it back. The first show is the story of the first domino. The second show is the story of the last one falling. Neither picture is complete on its own. The lone faller, multiplied and gathered and given a leader to love, becomes the cheering crowd. The cheering crowd, broken back down into the people who make it up, is just a collection of lone fallers who each said yes in their own quiet way. So the truer mirror, in the end, is not one or the other. It is both stacked together, showing the same darkness at two different moments in its life. But if the question is which of those two moments is the more dangerous, the answer is clear, and it points back to the verdict reached earlier. The crowd is more dangerous, because the crowd is the point of no return. A person who has fallen in private can still be reached, still be stopped, still be hunted by a world that holds its line. A crowd that has fallen in public has taken the world's line down with it, and there is no one left outside the rot to do the hunting. That is exactly why The Boys depicts the more corrupt world. It has reached the second moment, the unfixable one, the place where the alarm has been torn out of the wall. Breaking Bad remains at the first moment, the fixable one, where the rot is still trapped in single hearts and the world around them still fights back. There is a final, uncomfortable truth folded into all of this. And it is the reason these two shows have stayed in people's minds for so long. Both of them are ultimately about ordinary human beings. And both refuse to pretend that evil is something that only happens to other people in other places. Breaking Bad says the darkness can wake up inside any quiet, decent person, given the right wound and the right opportunity, with no monsters required. The Boys says that any group of ordinary, decent people can be led to cheer for cruelty, given a strong enough figure who tells them what they want to hear, with no superpowers required either. Strip away the drugs and the capes and the lasers, and both shows are pointing at the same plain, frightening fact about real life. The capacity for this is already here, in regular people, in private hearts and public crowds alike. The fiction is just the mirror. The darkness in the mirror is real. The verdict, then, can finally be stated in full and without hedging. The Boys depicts the more morally corrupt world because it shows the rot at its most advanced and most dangerous stage. The stage where the crowd has joined the monster and the world has lost its ability to fight back. Breaking Bad depicts a less corrupt world, a world still fighting its infection and still winning, but it tells the more intimate truth about where that infection begins, inside the ordinary human heart. The two shows are not really arguing against each other. They are describing the same long fall from two different points along the way, and together they form one of the most complete portraits of human darkness that television has ever produced. But a portrait of darkness is only half of any story worth telling, and both of these shows know it. In the middle of all that rot, in both worlds, there are still good people. There is Jesse, the drug dealer who never stopped feeling the weight of the innocent. There is Starlight, the young hero who keeps trying to do right in a world that punishes it. There is Huey, the ordinary boy who lost everything and chose to fight back instead of cheer. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The final measure of these two worlds is not just how deep their darkness runs. It is what each world does to the good souls trapped inside it, whether it lets them survive, whether it lets them win, whether it offers them any way out at all. And the fate of those few decent people, one of whom walks free into the morning light while another stays trapped in an endless fight, may be the last and truest test of just how corrupt each of these worlds really is. Section 10. Who gets to walk free? A world shows its true nature, not only in how deep its darkness runs, but in what it does to the few good people trapped inside it. Anyone can fill a story with monsters. The harder test of a world is whether goodness can survive in it, whether a decent soul can find a door out, whether the morning ever arrives after the long night. Both of these shows are crowded with rot, and both have been weighed for it carefully. The final measure now is mercy. The question is whether either world has any mercy left for the people who refused to join the cruelty. And the answer pulls the two shows apart one last time. Begin with Jesse Pinkman, the closest thing Breaking Bad has to a beating conscience. Jesse is no saint, and it would be a lie to pretend otherwise. He is a drug dealer and a killer, a young man with plenty of blood on his hands. But across the entire length of the show, he is the one who never stops feeling the weight of the innocent people who get hurt along the way. The death of Jane sits on him for years. The death of his friend Combo, shot dead in the street while selling, leaves a wound. The death of a young boy killed by other dealers nearly tears him apart. The murder of the child on the dirt bike breaks something inside him that never heals. Jesse carries a sense of right and wrong that all his crimes could never quite kill. And he suffers for it, season after season, because he cannot make himself stop caring the way the harder people around him have. What makes Jesse's story so heavy is that he keeps trying to climb out of the pit, and the pit keeps pulling him back down. More than once he reaches for the door. He wants to quit the drug life. He dreams about running away and starting over somewhere clean. At one point, he even arranges to vanish completely, to take on a new name and disappear from Albuquerque forever. The same escape that rich and ruthless men in that world buy for themselves. He is moments from gone. And every single time, something drags him back. Some new horror or some new betrayal that traps him again. For most of the show, the door Jesse reaches for is yanked shut in his face right before he can step through it. He is a good heart caught in a machine that will not let go. For caring, the world makes him pay a brutal price. The violent young killer named Todd, the same one who shot the boy in the desert, later murders Jesse's girlfriend, Andrea, shooting her dead on her own front porch as a way to keep Jesse obedient and afraid. The cruelty does not even stop with her. Andrea leaves behind her little son, Brock, a small boy who has now lost his mother to the same cold machine that took so much from Jesse already. The good in Jesse, the part that still feels, becomes the very thing his captors use to torture him. They threaten and harm the people he loves precisely because they know he still loves, still cares, still breaks when the innocent are hurt. His decency is turned into a leash around his own neck. The torture goes further still. Jesse is captured by a gang of vicious racists, chained up like an animal in an underground pit, beaten bloody, and forced to cook drugs for them against his will. A prisoner with no hope of escape and no end in sight. Scars cover his face. The light goes out of his eyes. By the final stretch of the show, Jesse has lost nearly everything, broken in body and in spirit. A man who tried to hold on to his conscience and was punished again and again for refusing to let it go. If any character in either of these two shows earned the right to be set free, it is this one. The young man who kept feeling when feeling only brought him pain. And then, at the very end, the world gives him something it never gives its monsters. It gives him a way out. In the show's final hour, Walt returns to the compound where Jesse is being held. And in the chaos of his last act, Walt frees him. Jesse takes hold of the chains that bound him and strangles Todd, his tormentor, with the very links that held him captive, ending the life of the one creature in that world who could murder a child and feel nothing. When Walt slides a gun toward him and tells him to pull the trigger, Jesse refuses to become the killer Walt wants him to be, leaving Walt to face his own end alone. Then Jesse climbs into a car and drives straight through the gate out into the open night, screaming and laughing and weeping all at once, alive and unchained and free for the first time in what feels like forever. The story does not abandon him there either. In the film that follows his escape, Jesse stays one step ahead of the police, sheds his old life with the help of the same quiet man who relocates the desperate, and disappears toward a brand new beginning far to the north. A fresh name and a clean slate in a quiet, snow-covered place where no one knows what he was. The last image of Jesse Pinkman is a man driving toward a sunrise and a second chance. He suffered more than almost anyone in that world. He lost his loves, his innocence, and years of his life to the cruelty around him. But in the end, the world let him go. It opened a door and allowed its battered conscience to walk through it into the morning light. That single fact says something enormous about the world of Breaking Bad. Even at its darkest, even with all its hidden monsters and its piled-up bodies, that world kept a door open for goodness. The functioning society, the surviving sense of right and wrong, the line that even criminals would not fully cross. All of it added up to a place where a decent soul could still escape. Hope was never fully erased from that world. The morning still came. A man who held on to his conscience through the worst of it was rewarded, in the end, with freedom and a future. That is the behavior of a world that is wounded, but still alive. A world that still has a working heart, beating somewhere deep inside its rot. The same holds true, in its own grim way, even for the monsters of that world. Walt dies at the end, but his story closes. The book shuts on him. A kind of justice arrives, however late and however costly it proves to be. Gus Fring is exposed and destroyed. The racist gang is wiped out. The drug agents, though many of them fall, keep doing their work. And the larger world keeps insisting, right to the end, that what these men did was wrong and must be answered for. The world of Breaking Bad never stops being a place where evil eventually meets an ending. The rot is real, and it is deep. But the world holds its line all the way to the last page. And because it holds that line, goodness is given somewhere to stand and somewhere to run. The contrast between Jesse and Walt makes the point sharper still. Two ordinary men walked into the same darkness at the same time. Partners in the same crimes, standing in the same deserts and the same basements. One of them, Walt, let the rot take him completely, choosing pride and power over every other thing until nothing of the gentle teacher was left alive in him. The other, Jesse, was dragged through far worse suffering than Walt ever faced, and still refused to let go of the part of himself that knew right from wrong. And the world treated each of them exactly as he had chosen. The man who surrendered his conscience was hunted down and buried in the wreckage of his own empire. The man who clung to his, no matter the cost, was carried out the far side of the nightmare and set free. That is a world with a sense of justice still wired deep into its bones. A world that, in the end, knows the difference between the two men and answers each one differently. Now turn to the good people of The Boys and watch how differently their world treats them. Start with Starlight, the young hero whose real name is Annie. From the very first day, when she was abused and silenced, Annie refused to become what the world around her wanted her to be. She held on to the honest dream that brought her into this life, the simple wish to actually help people and do what is right. And she fought. She fought harder than almost anyone in her world. She helped tear the lid off the company's biggest secret, the truth that the heroes were made by a drug and not born by a miracle. She stood up in public and told the truth about Homelander. when telling that truth could have gotten her killed on the spot. She built a movement of ordinary people who believed in her and believed in something better. She became the loudest, bravest voice standing against the rot at the top of her world. For all of that courage, watch what her world gives her in return. It gives her nothing but a longer fight. Every truth she exposes is buried, twisted, or simply absorbed by the company without slowing it down. The shocking secret about the drug comes out, and the world shrugs and keeps right on worshiping its heroes anyway. She even gets her hands on the proof of Homelander's worst hidden crime, the truth about the people he left to die in the sea. And still the public will not turn against him. Every step she takes forward is met by 2 steps back. The man she risked everything to unmask only grows stronger and more beloved. And in the moment that should have been her greatest victory, the moment the public finally saw Homelander commit murder in broad daylight with their own eyes, the crowd did not rise up to join her side. The crowd cheered for him instead. Annie did everything right, everything a hero is ever supposed to do, and her world answered by handing her enemy a bigger crowd and a louder cheer. The toll of that endless losing fight is its own kind of horror, quieter than a laser, but just as real. Annie keeps her courage, but her world gives her every reason to throw it away. She watches the truth fail to matter over and over, until the very idea of truth starts to feel useless against a public that has decided not to care. She sees good allies hurt and killed around her. She learns the hard way that being right and being brave and being honest buy her almost nothing in a place that rewards the exact opposite. A person can only throw themselves against a locked door so many times before the door begins to win. The deepest cruelty her world commits against her is not any single blow it lands. It is the slow, grinding lesson that in a world this corrupt, goodness is not a road to victory at all, only a heavier and heavier weight to carry, while everyone around her cheers for the very thing she is bleeding to stop. The same trap holds Huey, the ordinary young man whose girlfriend was killed in the opening minutes of the whole story. Huey had a choice back at the very start. The company offered him money to stay quiet, the same lid it places on every inconvenient problem. And he could have taken it and gone home and let the world keep spinning without him. He refused. He chose to fight back instead of looking away. A regular person with no powers at all, throwing himself against an empire of gods and lawyers. For that choice, his world rewards him with years of grief, terror, and loss. He is dragged through one nightmare after another, scarred deeper with every season, watching the people around him suffer and bleed and die. He keeps fighting because he is fundamentally good, and his world keeps punishing him for it, with no clean victory and no peaceful exit ever appearing on the horizon. That is the difference laid bare for anyone to see. The good people of Breaking Bad are battered and broken, but the world eventually opens a door and lets the survivor walk free into the dawn. The good people of The Boys fight just as hard and suffer just as much, and their world keeps every door bolted shut against them. It offers them no morning, no escape, no rest. Only an endless war against a rot that keeps winning every round. Jesse drives toward a sunrise and a second chance. Annie and Huey are left standing in the dark, staring at a crowd that just chose the monster over them, with nothing ahead but more of the same fight they have already been losing for years. Look too at what becomes of the monsters in each world, because that is the other half of the very same scale. In Breaking Bad, the powerful and the cruel are brought down one by one. The great drug boss is blown apart. The kingpin teacher dies on the floor of the lab he built. The gang of killers is mowed down. Every throne is eventually toppled, every crown knocked into the dirt. In The Boys, the thrones only grow taller. The company that drugged babies and buried murders is still standing strong. The hero who abused a frightened girl on her first day stumbles now and then, but always claws his way back to fame and comfort. And the god at the very top, the man who let a plane full of families fall into the sea, ends up not in a grave, but on a stage, beloved, untouchable, and more powerful than ever before. A world that topples its monsters and a world that crowns them are simply not the same kind of place, and the gap between them is the gap between a wound and a grave. Honesty demands that the costs in Breaking Bad not be softened or hidden. That world is no gentle place, and goodness pays dearly in it. Andrea is murdered on her porch. Her little boy is left motherless. Jesse is enslaved and tortured for months on end. Hank, the drug agent and the most decent lawman in the entire story, is gunned down in the desert while simply doing his job. Walt's family is shattered beyond repair. The exit that Jesse finds is soaked in blood and bought at a terrible, lasting price. And it is offered to only one of the many good souls who passed through that world and did not make it out. No one should pretend Breaking Bad is a story with a happy ending. It is a tragedy from beginning to end. But it is a tragedy with a survivor. A tragedy where the long night finally breaks and one good man lives to see the light come up over the horizon. That single sunrise is more mercy than the world of The Boys has shown anyone who dared to try to be good. Even the children in these two worlds meet opposite fates, and that may be the loudest signal of all. In Breaking Bad, when a child is killed, the world treats it as the unforgivable horror it truly is. The boy on the bike is mourned. Andrea's orphaned son is a wound the story refuses to wave away. The men responsible are marked as monsters and hunted to their deaths for it. A child's blood in that world demands a reckoning and eventually gets one. In The Boys, a child is not killed, but raised, and that is somehow worse. Homelander's young son, Ryan, stands beside his father and watches him murder a man in the street. And the boy slowly begins to smile. He is being shaped, in plain view of everyone, into the next god and the next monster. And the cheering crowd will be waiting to love him exactly as it loved his father. One world destroys the men who harm a child. The other world is busy building its next killer out of one, with an adoring audience already up on its feet. The death of a single child closes a man's whole life in one world. In the other, the shaping of a child opens the door to the next reign of terror, and the cheering crowd cannot wait. This is the last, and maybe the clearest measure of how corrupt a world truly is. A world can be judged by the depth of its darkness, and that judgment was already made in earlier sections. But a world can also be judged by what it does to the people who refuse the darkness. And that second judgment points the very same way as the first. A world that still lets its good people escape, still allows a door to swing open, still lets the morning come, is a world that has kept a single spark of hope alive somewhere inside its rot. A world that traps its good people forever, that bolts every door and rewards every cruelty and answers every brave truth with a louder cheer for the liar, has lost even that final spark. It has become a place where goodness can exist, but can never win, can suffer, but can never escape, can fight on bravely, but can never go home. By that measure, The verdict reached in the earlier sections only grows stronger and surer. The Boys depicts the more corrupt world, and the fate of its good people is the proof that seals it shut. Breaking Bad, for all its horror, is a world with an exit. A world where a battered conscience can still drive toward the dawn after everything it has endured. The Boys is a world with the exits sealed. A place where the good are condemned to an endless fight inside a society that has chosen, from the boardroom at the top to the crowd at the bottom, to love what is cruel and crush what is kind. One world breaks your heart, and then, at the very last, lets one good man go free. The other world breaks your heart, and then quietly locks the door behind it. There is a strange comfort hidden inside the Breaking Bad ending that is worth holding on to, because it explains why that show, dark as it is, does not leave people feeling completely hopeless. The open door means the world still works underneath all of its damage. It means right and wrong still exist as real and active forces, that cruelty still runs into limits, that a person who holds on to their conscience through the fire might one day be let out the far side of it. The locked door in The Boys is exactly what makes that world feel like a true nightmare, because a nightmare is defined by the impossibility of waking up from it. In a world that cheers its monsters and traps its heroes and seals every exit, there is no waking up. There is only the dream getting darker, and the good people inside it slowly running out of room to stand. And yet, neither of these two shows was ever really just a story about a made-up world full of made-up people. The drug empires and the superpowers were always a kind of mirror, held up so that the people watching might catch a glimpse of something true reflected back at them. A world where goodness finds a door, and a world where goodness is trapped forever with the lights going out, are not only descriptions of two television programs. They are two different warnings about the real world that exists outside the screen. Two different answers to the oldest question of all, the question of whether decency stands any chance at all in a place that has started to go wrong. The very last thing to understand, before the final verdict on these two corrupt worlds is sealed for good, is what each of these stories is actually trying to teach the people who watch it, and which of those two hard lessons the real world most needs to hear right now. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.